to do that. What?
This is close to a planning issue. It makes me very nervous.
There's nothing that requires a vote on any zoning matter tonight. I think everybody knows everyone here, but I'll introduce myself. I'm Rick Bernhardt, Executive Director of the Planning Department, and Jennifer Carlett is here, who is the Assistant Director, and Greg Claxton, who is keeping us in line with this whole Nashville Next process. And so that you won't be I don't put you to sleep, we're going to split this presentation up into threes. That does not mean it's long, it just means that it's easier to keep it going. First thing is, this is the first update we've had an opportunity to come back to the council in about a year. We're in the middle of what shows up on our line as a process, but in reality, we're kind of 2/3 of the way through, with 1/3 being kind of research and then 1/3 being community organization input and ideas, and I'll kind of go through that. So what we're doing is beginning to turn to the decision-making process, which will take up the next year as we go forward. Just a reminder, we have a 23-person steering committee. They represent the scope of Nashville. They're based on, the plan itself is based on 4 pillars. We have represented efficient government with metro government, equity and inclusion with Nashville for All of Us, environmental stewardship with the Land Trust for Tennessee, and economic development and prosperity with the Chamber of Commerce, representing the 4 pillars on the committee. In addition, we have a community engagement committee that consists of more than 35 citizens, and their charge is to make sure that we get information out as properly as we can and get it out to all segments of the community. We want to make sure that this is an engaged community and the information is out there, and Jennifer will share a little bit about that at the end in terms of where we need your help and assistance as we go forward. Much of the work is being done by resource teams. That's made up of 120 local experts and advocates and citizens. They're dealing with these 7 topics. These will be the 7 topics that will be throughout the plan. There will be recommendations. So the plan actually goes much beyond just land use and transportation. It deals with everything from education, arts and culture, economic development, housing, etc., as you can see from the screen. So far, we have had 37 resource team meetings. The engagement committee meets once a month roughly, and a number 25 steering committee meetings to get us to the point that we're working diligently to make sure that we're coordinating. This is a coordination process that includes not only the satellite cities in Davidson County, but we have met with all of the surrounding counties as well to understand the issue and talk with them about the plan itself. But we're also working very closely with the MPO. Our numbers are consistent with the MPO, MTA, the health department, and other actions and activities that are going around, such as the urban forest plan that's being done right now, and other studies there. So we're in coordination with those to make sure that we are consistent with the overall planning efforts that are going on. So far, we have focused, as I mentioned, transitioning from kind of the public input and visioning. We had a number of nationally recognized speakers, a number of community meetings. We had community events. We have been at any number of things, from festivals to, you may have seen members of our engagement committee or planning team that have been involved at local Kroger's or other food stores to try to meet people in where they are. What we have had so far is an awful lot of big sky visioning, big ideas. We have garnered over 8,000 different ideas, which we have been able to group together in 180 categories, and that kind of came down to 34 individual vision issues, which we then sit out to the community once again and said, what are your priorities out of these areas, out of the ideas that you have provided? What are the key priorities for metropolitan government in the region as we go forward? And these kind of show what it is. The top 5 included affordable living and transit as being key issues, growing economy, a walkable neighborhood, and strong neighborhoods. And strong neighborhoods refers to neighborhoods that provide a diversity of housing and a diversity of income types, that the strength is kind of in the social cohesiveness, providing opportunities for a number of people. Once we had the vision priorities, we worked with the resource teams and the steering committee to come up with guiding principles that will guide the plan itself. And these are critically important, and these are just code words. There's more detail in here in terms of what the individual elements of the guiding principles are. But be Nashville, fostering strong neighborhoods, expanding access, and the focus on that is expanding genuine access, providing access to all people that's truly accessible, creating opportunities, advancing education, championing the environment, ensuring equity are basically the 7 key guiding principles that form the foundation of the plan. We took those guiding principles out to the public and asked them to rate those on a scale of 0 to 5. Did these cover the ideas that they wanted to? And as a result of that, here's the results there. So I think the steering committee was able to interpret the input that was given to us over the first, basically the first year of the process, and to identify the key elements. There's obviously very little difference here between high of 4.7 and 4.4, but these were all ranked extremely high as we went forward. Taking that, we began to move into the growth mapping process. This was a pretty interesting process where we developed maps and we developed different land use types in terms of chips that we gave people, and said that the projections are we need 100,000 homes, 200,000 people, and 300,000 jobs, and where do you want to put those in the community? And again, this is our allocation of the regional growth of that 1 million people that will be happening over the next 25 years in this region. So where do you want to have them? And before I show you kind of this, I think the most telling comment was, we had one lady that came and said her job was to come and preserve her neighborhood. But after spending an hour and a half here, she was sure glad she didn't have the mayor and the council's job of having to decide where this went. So if nothing else, it served as a challenge to the difficulty of trying to make the decisions that we have here. But as a result, we were able to get we had a number of individual maps that were prepared by groups of people. We went through a process where we digitized those maps and tried to get an idea of what was the preference in terms of where we were going. And so if you kind of put all of the chips together, the population chips, you began to see kind of a pattern such as this, for example. And we'll talk a little bit about this because we're moving into what the alternative futures might be, is where we're going right now. One of the other questions we said were, where do you see growth? Where would you like to see growth? And what areas would you like to preserve? And these may have been anything from a park to a specific location. But again, you see, what you begin to see is growth happening kind of in the downtown, along the corridors, and preservation being done in certain areas. So we did have some takeaways, I guess, from the whole exercise, which included strong support for protection of Northwest Davidson County, and that may or may not translate into things like limiting sewer expansion and stuff like that, but strong support for continuing downtown development and intensification. Now, we're not totally sure that was simply keep it away from me and put everything downtown, but it was one of the things that came out of this. And also, there was support for mixing uses in close proximity. Some of the chips were mixed use chips at different levels of intensity, and those were very popular in terms of mixing uses and stuff. So we had a continued support for transit, a recognition that there's very little opportunity for increased highways, some expansion, but transit is going to have to be more utilized in the future. We need to be utilizing, defining areas of support through our community plan process, and we'll talk a little bit about how the community plans play into this, because they do have an important role as we go forward. And there was really kind of a mixture in terms of the approach to infill. In some cases it was good, in some cases it wasn't. So what we got out of this was the need to be more nuanced and make sure that infill, and you're seeing bills like this already that really kind of come out of this process, bills that take a little more concern for context sensitivity. I think that the council will be discussing as we go forward, continue discussing more different housing types as reflecting the changing demographics of the community. But how do we protect the quality of life and the quality of neighborhoods, but also have infill at the right location? And so the last thing I want to leave you with, so far during this process, we've had over 10,000 people participate. We have provided any number of ways, and we'll kind of go through those a little later, so I'm not going to jump on that, but ways to have people participate that's comfortable to them. Changing demographics are such that we're not coming to a meeting is not the first idea that a lot of people have in ways to participate, and y'all know that as well as anything. So we're going to be asking your help. So I'm going to turn it over to Greg and let him talk a little bit about where we're going with the options and where we are right now.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to talk through a couple of the big pieces that shape what the public will be responding to over the next few months, basically this summer. The first big part are what we call our alternate futures. These are different ways that Nashville could grow and change over the next 25 years. This is the kind of the big pivot point in the whole process in 2014. These alternate futures are, what we're trying to do is provide plausible stories for how we could grow and change in the future, in which we change our infrastructure and land uses in a way that we can explore the consequences of those decisions. So if the CHIP exercise was just kind of where do you want to see it, not near me or near me, here we want to say, okay, if we put it here, what does that mean for us as a community? And they really do zero in on kind of the physical structure of Davidson County, primarily, how we play out our land uses and what our transportation system is like. And we use our resource teams to sort of expand beyond just the physical city and understand what do these futures mean for all of the other plan elements and all of the other things that people in Nashville care about. There are a few common elements to all of the scenarios. First, they start with places and patterns identified in the community plans. We think that the current community plans are a fantastic foundation for this long-term visioning. So we wanted to start with and respect those as we got started. Second is that they all use the same growth numbers. We didn't want to have one future that was a high growth scenario and one that was a low growth scenario. So this is something that's constant between them. We also wanted to treat some of the recent flashpoints in Nashville politics the same. So we haven't added any activity centers on Bells Bend or the fairgrounds, and all show an enhanced transit on West End. Again, our point is to try to get input on the overall way that we grow without people picking the scenarios based on one particular issue. And then they're all concerned with big choices that we make, grow here or grow there. They all recognize that we'll continue to have sort of smaller neighborhood centers, things that we've heard about from the community plans. Those will continue to happen. I'm going to show you three scenarios, three alternate futures, just to get a sense of how quickly this is all coming together. As of this morning, we had 4. We decided based on how the results are coming out for 2 of them that are very similar that we're going to merge them. So the 2 that are up here, and I'll show you better maps in just a moment, that are labeled Downtown Expands and Centers and Pikes are going to get merged into one that's Downtown and Pikes. So the key thing that we're changing in each of those scenarios are where people and jobs go. As an example, this is our business as usual scenario. If trends continue, this is the population. So dark blue means more additional people in a place. Lighter blue means fewer people, and gray means none at all. So you can see in this map there's very little gray. You see some dark spots in the kind of the downtown area, but then also in southeast. The next slide is the same thing, but for employment. And here we use red. So dark red in the center, more kind of pinkish color out to the east, and then some gray areas to the northwest that don't see a lot of new jobs added in this trend scenario. And then what we're working on, kind of how we present this to the public to try to help them understand both of these working together, is we overlay them together. And so you see some purple downtown, where you have a lot of people and a lot of jobs being added, but then areas outside of downtown that are a little more pink, because they're mostly jobs, areas particularly to the northwest and west that are blue, where they have mostly new residents.
You might tell, the smaller maps are much better than the big one to the right.
Or, I'm sorry, yeah, for the folks in the room, yeah, the colors over here pop.
Yeah.
Up here.
Okay. So this is business as usual, and it's kind of a weird mishmash of stuff. You see a lot of downtown development, but you also see a lot of spreading development to the northwest, but also the southeast and the northeast. For the rest of the futures, what I'm going to do is show you two different maps. One that's sort of the policy, what we told our computer model to do, and the other is that results map of red and blue and purple. And so for the downtown and Pikes one, what we have is a big circle downtown, and then smaller circles on major pikes coming out of downtown. And the idea here is that if we really focus on downtown and expand our idea of what downtown is, including Midtown, Metro Center, some industrial land to the southeast, we can make that, kind of bring that back as the employment center, the major employment center in the county and in the region. And then to make sure that people have access to those jobs, we would encourage more service and more residential development along pikes leading out of downtown. And so that's what you can see here, where downtown comes out as purple, but you see a lot, kind of heavier blue lines coming out, particularly on Charlotte, on Nolensville, West End, and Gallatin. So here the thinking is, again, to pair that job concentration downtown with more residences who can access it. Right, and then the other thing that happens is because we're sucking kind of more people and jobs to the already developed areas, environmentally sensitive areas to the northwest get less development. Dickerson shows up as well, not quite its whole length, but up to about Briley, I think. Mm-hmm. Right, and I think that shows up when you get really close to downtown. You can see it really pops for purple. We do. It doesn't show up as strong on here, but it kind of from the policy that we told it, we do identify a part of Clarksville Pike for additional growth. With the next one, we took a slightly different perspective. Again, we're looking at kind of more enhanced growth downtown, but instead of filling out all along the pikes, what we tried looking at here was more intense centers throughout the county. So picking up the malls, picking up areas near the airport for employment centers, picking up at Gallatin and Briley. And what we're trying to show here is a sense that we could identify very intense activity centers and then identify areas for adjacent residential infill development close to them to take advantage of the jobs that are going in these areas dispersed throughout the county. We call this centers with infill, centers with adjacent infill. And again, you can kind of see it popping out. Again, the colors are a little washed out here, but you see these purple dots start to pop out in different parts of the county. And our thinking here is that it's dispersing where the jobs are at, so that maybe it's a little easier to get to something close to you rather than everyone having to travel downtown. And in particular for paying attention to the transit side and the transportation side of the conversation, giving people a way to get to jobs without going downtown. We know these maps are difficult to understand. They're very complex and they have a lot of information. So one of the things that we're working on is a range of other ways to illustrate what's going on. And so one tool that we have, we'll be providing 3 of these diagrams for each of the futures. It's kind of a sort of a SketchUp tool where we sketch out what could this look like if we develop these ways. This is a shot of downtown we'll be doing one for downtown, one for a center, and then one for more of a greenfield location, so people can see kind of how these play out. Right. The dark blue is just the background.
This is early. This is
Yeah.
a very early.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten these yet. So yeah.
It's floating right now. You're right.
Yeah. Another thing that we can do is take the same kind of blotchy maps that I showed earlier and show them on kind of a 3D level. So you can see kind of, if you visualized it three-dimensionally, where are the spikes in additional growth. So this is from business as usual. You see that there's a lot of growth downtown, but there's also a very large spike near the airport in Southeast. And so this is another way that we're looking to help sort of convey to people where is most of the change happening. The last thing is getting to, well, what does it mean? Understanding that the map is one thing, but what does it mean for the things that I care about? Based on the community input so far that we've had, based on the visioning and the guiding principles, we worked with our steering committee to come up with this list of outcomes that we're going to report out to the public. How do these scenarios do on each one of these? So does it make it, do I have more transportation choices or less compared to today? Is the environment better or worse compared to today? Is affordability better or worse? We'll present that to the public in a pretty rough schematic way, better, much better, plus, double plus, worse or much worse, minus or double minus. And this is, again, fitting it in very roughly for y'all. We're working with our outreach folks to present this in an inviting, engaging way. But this is just kind of conveying the concept of what we're doing. And then, we'll be working, and Jennifer will have more detail on this in a moment, but all throughout the summer, we'll be surveying on this, asking people not just how do you rate these different futures, but why? So that we understand kind of the nuances of what people are responding to in each one. That's the big pivot part. That's the focus of our mass outreach for this round. In addition, we also have goals and policies, things that flesh out and get into areas other than just land use and transportation that we've been working on. This is where our resource teams have come in. Those 7 topical groups, bringing in community members and experts to help us figure out kind of what kind of things do we need to address. These folks have been working for about a year now on helping us to understand key trends shaping our future, developing goals and policies and shortly actions to shape that future, how we harness the investments and the regulations that the general plan directs to achieve the future that people want. And then we're also going to look to them for help in implementing the plan once it's adopted. Their first task was really to drill down on what are those trends shaping how Nashville kind of gets into the future. We wanted to be really sensitive that there are a very large number of diverse perspectives related to all of these topics and try to get them all in the room and at least have an awareness of how their different perspectives interact. And then before they started, developing recommendations, we wanted them to just get comfortable working together. Out of all of that, kind of our first year of work, what they've done this year is develop a set of goals and policies, a small set of very broad ideas for how we should make decisions in the future that we're also going to take out to the public this summer. We'll have a few different tools online and at meetings that people can use to try to get feedback on this part as well. Our goal is that by the end of the plan, all of our goals and policies and all of our land use and transportation maps and plans fit together and support one another.
Hey, we're going to transfer it down to Jennifer, but before I do, I have to say something. This is the first opportunity we as a community have had to talk community-wide issues in over 20 years in terms of the basic structure of how we want the community and some of those trade-offs. And it will lead to discussions on the community plans, which Jennifer's kind of going to go through. But once once these alternatives are discussed in the alternative futures and there's a preferred alternative, then the community plans will be adjusted to meet that that preferred alternative, because the whole purpose of this is have the community talk at large about what's important to them, what's important to preserve, what's important, and how do we want to develop. So it's a critically important summer, and we're going to be soliciting your support for getting your communities out to be part of that. And we've had, I'll use one example because the highest participation rate has been in the Whites Creek area, and they've got a fundamental issue about, does it become rural or suburban? And one of these options, it's much more suburban than the other two, which is much more rural. So they need to be part of that discussion if that's what's important to them, because if the one that becomes more suburban is chosen by the community, then it's likely to have a significant impact on them, for just one example.
So as Greg and Rick were talking about, this summer is when we're going to be engaging the community and having them pick among those three, what is your preferred feature, why, what do you like about them, what do you dislike about them, and like that. So in just a minute here, I'm going to go through all of the outreach opportunities that we're going to have and ask you guys, make the ask to have you get your constituents out. From that preferred feature, as Rick was saying, we will start meshing the community plans to match that preferred feature. So the community is going to choose that. We're imagining that it'll probably be a combination of those scenarios. People have things they like and dislike about each. And then we're also going to tie it back to the goals and policies Greg was talking about from economic and workforce development, children and youth, so on and so forth. So, a lot of your folks are very familiar with our community plan process. What I think a lot of community members don't necessarily understand is that we have a general plan in place today. It's called Concept 2010, and it has a 25-year outlook. It was last updated in 1992. And it has some functional plans. There's one for economic and workforce development, for housing, for public safety. But a lot of what Concept 2010 does is provide some broad goals for land use and transportation. But in their wisdom, these folks figured out that they couldn't create a land use and transportation plan that would be static for 25 years. If you think about where Nashville was in 1992, it's really changed a lot. So what they did is set up the community plans. So in 14 different communities that you guys have overlapping districts with, we do a community plan update every 7 to 10 years, and that's supposed to guide the vision for future growth and development and preservation. And by doing it on that smaller scale, we can get into a finer grain, we can do them more frequently and be more responsive. And so the community plans are our main land use guidance that we have. And you remember the tools we use are the land use policies, which you know are being phased out this summer, and they're going to be replaced by, we'll solely be using the community character policies, which place much more of an emphasis on what is the character of the area. Is it rural? Is it suburban? Is it urban? So that we don't look homogeneous in like anywhere United States. So after the preferred vision is determined, we'll go back out this fall and be working with the communities to say, hey, over the summer, you picked your preferred vision. Now let's match up your plan to support that preferred vision. And, I forgot the part where you all know that zoning and subdivisions are based on the community plans. So when we update the community plans, a lot of the pieces that we have today will remain the same. Community description, we talk a lot about the community's role in the county and the region. Scottsboro, Bells Bend, it plays a different role in terms of having sensitive environmental features and cleaning our air and our water. It plays a very different role than downtown, which is the region's place to play and work and more recently live. So we talk about the role of each community. We lay out visions and goals, a concept plan. If there's any unique policy needed, this new updated plan will still have that. And then we put in what are called development scenarios, ways that areas could redevelop, just to kind of spur some ideas and some creativity. So this fall then, we'll work on updating the community plans, but I wanted to stress again that part of that update, the reason we're updating the community plans, is that they have always been part of the general plan. And so as we're updating Nashville Next, then we update the community plans as well. And so when we finish up with Nashville Next in summer of 2015, rather than needing to go out and update community plans, we can all work collectively on other implementation tools. And so it'll give us kind of a running start to become the city that we want to be. Another thing I wanted to point out, I think we missed a slide, is that we'll start the Pick Your Future, picking that preferred future this summer, so it's June through August, and then we'll be back out to visit with your communities in October and November, saying, hey, here's the vision you picked, now let's align your community plan to match up with that. And so I cannot stress enough that it's important to get your folks out this summer, because as Rick was saying, this fall the preferred vision will be chosen, and it'll just be about aligning plans. It's this summer that we need everybody to come out and say, oh, I pick A, not C. I pick B, not A, so on and so forth. Okay. So the public input for this summer. We've talked about how we're going to have this preferred vision, and it'll guide our land use and transportation and infrastructure decisions for Nashville for many, many years. Up until this point, we've had varying participation by different parts of the county. This is a map that shows by zip code where we've had participation. And so if you are in red, the darker red you are, the more participation we've had from that zip code. Meanwhile, it goes to orange, then to yellow, light green, and all the way to dark green, which are the areas that have had the poorest participation thus far. Now, I will say, if you've got a super dark green area and you're right on the boundary, you're getting docked by the fact that your zip code goes into another county and folks from the other county aren't going to participate. So we're not as worried about those, but the ones that are in the lighter green and the yellow, we have tailored our community meetings this summer to really hit those areas. So I wanted you all to know that we're trying to be responsive to how we've had good or poor participation up to this point in different parts of town. Yes.
For 37207, you know, it might be better to show it because doing some stuff, I hate to make you find folks that plan to work on the weekend, but you know, I have a lot of parents that work that want input, but can't come out to a Wednesday and Thursday night. And I love all my neighbors, but we need not just the hipsters and the people that don't have trouble making decisions, but we need everybody's input. So I hate to, I'll try as best I can, because that's as long as 37207.
No, I'll write it down, but I do know that some of the meetings that they've been looking at are on weekends. So we can check for your area for sure. Okay, good. So we'll be choosing some of our community meeting locations based on this map, and we will try to be sensitive to times and people's schedules. Everybody's busy these days. So say you want to go to one of these open houses, which we are calling Nashville Next Lounges. So when you see lounge come up, that's when you know, oh, it's an open house. So we're going to have about 25 of these across the county, and we'll be sending you an overall list. So if you all can do any email blasts that you do, any online presence, any handouts at community meetings that you're going to or announcements, we sure would appreciate that. And again, those are going to start about mid-June.
And we can provide them handouts.
Yes, we can also provide handouts too if you guys want those for your meetings. Now, say that your community members say, oh, open house, that's not really my gig. Okay, also we go out to community events, and we are in particular going to focus on events that reach some hard to reach groups. We've had in the past year a lot of success reaching lower socioeconomic and lower literacy Nashvillians at community events, and so that's pretty much who we're targeting again. Folks come out, they want something fun for their kids to do on a weekend, and so we're out there and we'll get input from these community events as well. Now, say you have some community members that are like, hey, I like to talk about these ideas a little bit more in depth with some folks I know. We've got a product called Meetings to Go. We send you a little packet, and it goes in depth on one of the topics we've discussed today. And then you and your friends and your book club and your prayer group and your merchants association, your neighborhood association can take about an hour to discuss the topics that are before you, fill out some little surveys, and then hand it back to us. And so that's a more comfortable way for some folks to be involved. We're going to be doing some texting applications. We're going to have a very rich online survey where you can go page by page, look at the different futures, and compare them. Hey, affordability matters to me, so I can figure out which one does better on affordability, or protecting the environment, or fiscal austerity, things like that. So you can do that on the web. And then finally, for some of our groups that are really hard to reach, we're going to do some focus groups. And we're also going to be having some community conversations on 4 different topics that seem to be coming up repeatedly. One is on affordable housing and gentrification. And we'll be getting you an entire slate of when these are and like that. One community conversation is on economic development, and specifically on having investment-ready places. Places that when that new business comes to town, we can know exactly they've got the zoning, the community support, the infrastructure, they are ready to go. One that's on arts and culture and trying to find spaces for our artists and entrepreneurs. And then the final one is on transportation and transit, biking, walking, and figuring out what we're going to be doing in the future. So each of these will be a one-time event where we bring everybody in to talk, to hear a very brief presentation, but then to talk in small groups about what this means to them, so we can take these big, tough conversations and move them a little bit more down the field. Okay. Before I switch over to the plan itself, I did want to reiterate, we'll send you the entire menu of ways that you can get your folks involved. We can help with providing materials for you to hand out. If any of you want to do any brainstorming on ways to get your constituents more involved, we so very much appreciate your assistance because you guys know your folks better than we do. So if you can help us think through more ways to get them out and involved, we sure appreciate it. Okay, so the plan itself, just a quick overview of the outline. It will start with kind of the purpose of the plan, why we do this kind of planning, and an introduction. The elements are those pieces like the land use, transportation, infrastructure, economic and workforce development, arts and culture, and like that. We'll have a chapter dedicated to the community plans and those updates. We'll have a special section on actions, and there may be a hard copy version, but I gotta tell you, we're spending a lot of time thinking about some kind of online database so that at the click of a button, people can understand this was the action item to achieve this goal for the city, and this is where we are on achieving it. And then we always include some of our supporting documents, including the Community Character Manual, our dictionary of all of our policies, and then Mobility 2030, which talks about where we're headed in terms of transit, walking, biking, greenways, and like that. Okay. And so we just kind of wanted to close out with telling you again, up till this point, it's really easy to get people involved to say what they want and to kind of daydream in a good way. It's harder than when it's time to choose and make some decisions that involve trade-offs and have real ramifications. And so this summer is a really critical point for us, and anything that we can do to get your folks more involved, we want to do it. I don't know if you have any ideas now or other questions, but we're available. So.
I'll push buttons for folks, but a process question. After the community picks its preferred vision, is there not hypothetically a potential that a particular area working on their community plan to make it fit that vision is not bought into in a large number? Let me just, if example, Whites Creek, not that it would ever happen, but if there are 3 scenarios and 2 are essentially the same and 1 is develop it all, and the broader community decides on develop it all, but the folks living there, how does the process reconcile that?
Right. The process itself could result in that way. the more participation we get up front, the easier that's
Right.
going to be. But obviously, the process will include refinements until the point when it winds up getting presented to the Planning Commission in next spring, which, we could have that. But it's designed to have that community-wide discussion, and ultimately, the commission will need to be making that decision, or will be making it jointly. But you're absolutely right, that could happen. We hope it's minimal.
And I'm not trying to look for a worst-case scenario.
No.
I was just curious whether the process was...
It could happen, yes.
Okay. Scott? Chip?
Hey, thank you for all the hard work that you folks have put in developing this. Quick question, and not trying to beat a dead horse on this, but, a lot of areas, and especially part of mine and some of the others, we have a digital divide within certain ethnic groups and in the African American community. And so I'm just really stressing the importance of getting, doing different steps and other things in order to make sure that those voices get heard. But also a lot of my poor Caucasian trailer parks there on Dickerson too. Also, one thing I want to kind of look at again now, when you talk about the expansion of kind of the downtown corridor, okay, really looking at those areas like North First, Cowan, all that area that's touching the outskirts of downtown, are you looking to increase that density or where, because, we can't move further west, and, it could probably go further, into other parts, but looking at it going across the river, kind of east, like Dickerson and Gallatin, is that where you're talking about with those arms coming out?
Yeah, yes. I mean, I think that, again, the maps that you saw up here are an indication of what implementing that kind of theme would result in. But let's say the downtown expands is the consensus overview. Then, as we work through the community plan, what we would say was, okay, how do we implement the downtown expands? Okay, and you'd be looking at Dickerson Road, or you'd be looking at Nolensville Pike, or you'd be looking at Murfreesboro, and close in, because a lot of those have opportunities to redevelop. So that's kind of the focus under that scenario would be, how do we take downtown and then we come out from downtown along the pikes? It would be developable.
So looking at a strong expansion, even now, coming down from those arms like Dickerson, Murfreesboro, North First, and other parts, it wouldn't be a frowned upon policy.
Not under that scenario, no.
Okay.
Either of those, right?
Frank? Councilman Harrison?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Would you say, my question, I got two questions. Would you say that participation from the community is vital for, say, the outlook of the particular region that they're in? And if they are not participating, could something maybe be developed in that area that they're not necessarily in line with or like? And if so, what could they do about it? Because as you said, we need to, encourage more participation. But I have a couple of areas that people, I announce in the home association meetings all the time that they should, be involved, but no one is really sending anybody out there. So I'm just afraid that if they're not participating, they're going to end up with some type of development in their area that they have no input.
Well, I think that participation is critical, and let me kind of hit it from a couple of areas. Number one, for the plan to actually be effective, it needs to reflect the goals and values of the community. And so it needs to have that input. And with the structure of Nashville and the councils and the council districts, long-term implementation, we'll go every 4 years, we go through a different council. And so, the implementation requires the involvement of the community itself. That being said, ultimately, much of this will be on be in the hands of the council, but if, as you well know, if we have community plans, and in this case Nashville Next with the community plans that call for a certain direction, then what you're saying as a community is that it is our policy to implement this, and so it's a lot more difficult to overcome that than it is to get the policy the way that the community wants it in the first place.
I got one area in particular that seems to be being stimulated on its own for the most part, that Fern Avenue area. I mean, every time you look around, somebody's calling me and wanting to see whether or not they could get some type of development started there. So you got a lot of plans right now for houses to be built over there, and I don't think anybody up there started out being involved in Nashville Next, but
no, but a lot of our,
right along.
an awful lot of the neighborhoods like that are areas that they're prime for development. And Councilman Davis, I mean, one of the things that continues to surprise me to this day, having grown up here, is the unbelievable views of downtown from Dickerson Road, and how there hasn't been people that have actually taken more advantage of that. I mean, you see that on Fern, you know, with what people are doing, but I think probably some of the best views are right there on Dickerson Road, and we prefer to have I guess a junk salvage store at that location with the best views of downtown there. So
that's why the NDHA in place too. We're
right.
Trying to definitely get some of it for sure.
Councilman Matthews.
Thank you, Councilman Stein. I guess this will be a question that may have to go offline, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Right now, in the Bordeaux Whites Creek area, those community plans are actually tied into one. It's Bordeaux Whites Creek, and you may have, and I know I'm very sensitive to it, but you may have two conflicting views of how that area should develop in each part. May there be opportunity to maybe split that into two community plans, since it's so polarized as far as the two separate point of views, and I know that people that are in Bordeaux are very sensitive to the desire for preservation in Whites Creek and Scottsboro Bells Bend, but there's still this desire to develop closer to the inner city and
right.
Closer to the core. So that may be a conversation. You don't have to really answer it right now or try to, but just think about if we could give that some consideration on how that community plan could be fleshed out.
Yeah, let me just address one thing, because this is universal to a lot of the community plans. I mean, the fact that there's different visions in different parts of that obviously is not a big deal. I mean, you can have a different vision for Whites Creek, and you can have a different vision for Scottsboro's Bell Bend and Bordeaux. I mean, they can all be different and still be part of one plan. One thing that we didn't share, and let me share this. We've just finished work with University of Tennessee Design Studio, and I know you know this, Councilman, and the Georgia Tech Design Studio, where they spent the spring semester looking at 12 different suburban situations, looking for suburban retrofit. And they did the North by Northeast area. They did Bordeaux, parts of Bordeaux. They've done areas on Nolensville Pike, several, I guess we've got 3 along Nolensville Pike, with the abandoned Kmart and the abandoned Lowe's and kind of downtown Woodbine. And what they're doing is throwing out ideas as to how those could develop in a more walkable, mixed-use fashion. And Jennifer mentioned that community plan updates may include some of those as idea generators in terms of where we go. So just last week we got the final products presented to us, and they're in the process of sending them to us, and we may want to schedule an opportunity for the council members in the various areas. These are areas that are transferable situations. Obviously, an abandoned Kmart in Nolensville and Harding is applicable to an abandoned Kmart, maybe in other areas as well. So we just tried to pick areas that had certain unique circumstances, but we also played on some things that were particularly interesting. I know the North by Northeast was one that is there at Trinity and I-65 and stuff, so we'll be glad to share that with y'all.
Okay. Councilwoman Gilmore.
Thank you, Chair Stein. I just wanted to say, I saw that affordable housing did show up. I'm glad that it did. This past Sunday, there was a really in-depth article done in the New York Times and just talking about how in most of the major cities that forget affordable housing, that the middle class are not even able to live in the city anymore. So this leads into the question that I do have for you. What tools, we always say that affordable housing is important, middle class housing is important, but we don't really have tools that we are implementing as a city council. So will we see that, or as a city, will we talk about inclusionary zoning and really enforcing that type of zoning? Will we talk about what the trust fund can do as it relates to developers, or them giving so much? And even then, the particular story shared that, you do 1,000 developments and then you only get maybe 200 out of so what do we really have to offer? Will we have some concrete tools to use at our disposal?
There will be tools. I mean, the whole issue of affordable housing, as you saw, wound up being the #1 issue from the community. And it was interesting from the very beginning. We did our initial polling where we did 2,000 person polling, 1,000 inside the county and 1,000 outside, and then we did 120 thought leaders kind of detailed interviews. And what we found was that the community at large was much ahead of the thought leaders in terms of affordability and affordable housing and how important that was. And that has shown up all the way through this as being important. Our housing committee is on top of the affordable housing issue. One of the topics, as Jennifer mentioned, is going to be on affordable housing and gentrification issues. We've got a special study that's underway right now with Vanderbilt University and Jim Frazier, and working with a group that are actually studying what are options that we need to consider here. What are going to be specific tools that would be applicable here? I think that of everything that we do, maybe aside from transit, affordable housing may be the most difficult issue to try to deal with. There's not a long history of having proactive housing programs here. We've primarily done federal programs. We haven't typically intervened in the market. I mean, the tools that we have now, we have the Housing Trust Fund, we've got the tax waiver for elderly, and we've worked some other things. But I think the whole issue of affordability is going to be a critical issue. And it's growing because all of our neighborhoods are becoming more attractive for higher income populations. I mean, I think that we see that. And internally, we've kind of talked an awful lot about what is resulting is what we're calling the suburbanization of poverty. And you not only lose opportunities for different income levels to stay in neighborhoods, but you also increase the cost of trying to provide services. You don't have transit service, you don't have health services, and it's a big issue. And housing cost, and the further out you get, the more housing costs are, because your total housing cost is obviously housing and transportation, and it's going to cost you a whole lot more. It is a big issue. It's a big issue that we're probably spending more time on that than maybe any other issue, and we'll be bringing recommendations. I can't say what those are now because I don't actually know what they are now, but there's a lot of people that are working on it on the resource teams and their consultants as well. Yeah.
The only thing I would add is the town hall on the gentrification and affordability issue is going to be on June 24th. I believe it's at 5:30 and at the Martin Learning Center on Fairfax. And again, we'll send you the list of all of the town halls, but since that one's very important to you, you can get it on your calendar.
Okay, thank you, Chair Stein. I did have one follow-up question too. I want to know if you are collaborating with social services and the data that they have. I know especially for the 19th district, even though the 19th district represents downtown, it's basically what you're saying, so I don't have to reiterate it, but it's a lot of red there, which they use to symbolize the poverty that's there. So I just wonder, are you guys using any of their data and just kind of collaborating with them on that, since they have so much data as it relates to poverty, housing,
right,
and sidewalks and transportation and those type of things?
Yes, we are coordinating with their data. And yes.
Okay.
Councilwoman Allen.
Thank you. I want to follow up on that just a little bit. I mean, you've said that affordability was the number one issue that came up, and yet in the three futures that were envisioned, that all three of those were negative on affordability in
No,
terms
no.
Ah, good.
That was not, that was simply a hypothetical. That was not a real analysis.
Excellent. Okay, well, I'm just going to
Yeah.
try to see how in the world do we...
No, don't take those.
You might
was
throw that
simply-
slide out then.
Yeah. Well, we just wanted to show kind of what it would look like, but it was not
Okay.
a true analysis of what those are.
Good
Yeah.
to know. And I'm sure we look at other cities. I know Davidson, North Carolina has an amazing program that has done some really cool things with the Davidson Housing Coalition and lots of other cities
Right.
as well in terms of creating zoning that incentivizes building a range of housing types. And they've done a good job of creating a lot of diversity even within the city limits. I'd love to look at what other cities are doing and try to
I think there's a lot of tools here. I think it's there's no one tool that's going to be there, but tools that you're actually considering now are tools that go to affordability. The issue of detached accessory housing, for example, is a tool that many cities use, and you think about it, it's not always for the person that owns the house. The person that owns the house may move to the detached accessory unit and rent out the house as a way to pay, to pay for the maintenance and upkeep of that house. And so there's a lot of tools, but it's going to take us thinking a little more outside the box. We're looking at kind of what's referred to as missing middle housing. Where are appropriate locations? We've had a lot of discussion on duplexes and where are appropriate locations for duplexes, not appropriate locations for duplexes. Some small, cottage development, which I know most. If you're in any of the inner city, so you've got lots of demand for that. But when you look at the numbers in terms of the largest household group are one-person households, and the numbers in terms of aging boomers like me, the old gray tsunami as it's referred to, and then the millennials, then providing choices, whether it's providing more housing opportunities along the pikes and then preserving the larger units that are off the pikes for families and stuff like that. This is going to be the issue that we're going to have to wrestle with, and there's not easy and clear answers, but there are a lot of tools that have been used across the country there, and part of it is beefing up our affordable housing providers as well. Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.